Rudolf Höss was a commandant of Auschwitz, who was known for his immense brutality and evil. He was a man who hid the killing capabilities of the camp he was overseeing from his wife, but he would then testify at the Nuremberg trials, almost proud of the atrocities he had committed. He bragged, "I commanded Auschwitz until the 1st of December 1943, and estimate that at least 2.5 million victims were executed and exterminated there by gassing and burning, and at least another 500,000 succumbed to starvation and disease, making a total of about 3 million dead. This figure represents about 70 to 80% of all persons sent to Auschwitz as prisoners, the remainder having been selected and used for slave labour in the concentration camp industries. Including amongst the executed and burned were approximately 20,000 Russian prisoners of war who were delivered at Auschwitz in Wehrmacht transports operated by regular Wehrmacht officers and men. The remainder of the total number of victims included around 100,000 German Jews and great numbers of citizens from the Netherlands, France, Belgium, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Greece or other countries. We executed about 400,000 Hungarian Jews alone at Auschwitz in the summer of 1944. But he later revamped his calculations on the death toll. But before he was taken to court for being one of the worst Nazi war criminals, he was subjected to a rough ordeal at the hands of the soldiers that apprehended him. Join us today to look at the brutal torture of the Commandant of Auschwitz, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Rudolf Höss was a man that oversaw the expansion of Auschwitz and the introduction of the gas chambers there. He was responsible for over 1 million deaths, but in 1943 he was relieved of the command of the camp after it was alleged he had an affair with an inmate who got pregnant. But he would return to Auschwitz on the 8th of May 1944 as he was to oversee Operation Höss. This would result in the exterminations of 430,000 Hungarian Jews in just 56 days. Auschwitz could not cope with the huge numbers of victims, and the crematoriums could not handle the sheer amount of people being slaughtered. Many were, because of this, shot by the SS to speed the process up, avoiding the gas chambers altogether. Rudolf Höss then made his way to Ravensbrück in November 1944, and he lived there with his family, and he supervised the creation and use of the gas chambers there, coordinating the female prisoners to their deaths. But as the Second World War was coming to an end, he was advised by Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, to hide himself to avoid execution and war crimes trials. He was told to pose as a member of the Kriegsmarine, and he then lived under a false name of Franz Lang. He moved and hid himself in Gottrupel, and he worked as a gardener. Höss managed to escape arrest for around a year, but his wife had been captured. She was interrogated for some time about where her husband was, and she eventually told the authorities that he was living under a false name as a gardener. In 1946, Hans Alexander, who was a German Jew, who had fled to England in 1936, became a Nazi hunter, and he was part of British No. 1 War Crimes Investigations Team, and they tried to obtain Rudolf Höss's location. Alexander was a captain in the Royal Pioneer Corps, and he then, after finding out the name of the place where he was working, travelled to arrest the Commandant of Auschwitz. Accompanying him were a number of British soldiers, and the story of Auschwitz was very well documented, and some Jewish soldiers accompanied him as they wanted to come face to face with the man who caused such misery and evil. Alexander's men approached Höss, and when he was spoken to, he claimed he was just a lowly gardener, and it was believed that he was trying to bite on a cyanide pill to evade justice. But this did not work, and Alexander then noticed when he came face to face with Höss that he had a wedding ring on his finger. Höss was ordered to take it off, and he refused, but then Alexander threatened to cut it off, and even fetched a kitchen knife ready to take his finger off. When it was removed, inside the ring was etched the name Rudolf and Hedwig, the name of his wife. After this, Alexander's men confirmed that he was Rudolf Höss, and the beating then commenced. Alexander left Höss alone with the British guards, who were armed with a box of axe handles, and for 10 minutes they beat him and pulverised the former commandant of Auschwitz. He was then told by a doctor that if he did not intervene and get his men to stop with the beating, then they would only have a corpse to bring back and place on trial. Alexander then told his men to back off, but they had administered a serious beating to the former commandant of Auschwitz. Rudolf Höss was then held under custody, and he testified at the Nuremberg trials. Whilst in prison, he wrote of his mistreatment at the hands of the British whilst he was in custody. He claimed that, during the first interrogation, they beat me to obtain evidence. I do not know what was in the transcript or what I said, even though I signed it, because they gave me liquor and beat me with a whip. It was too much for me to bear. The whip was my own. By chance it found its way into my wife's luggage. My horse had hardly ever been touched by it, much less the prisoners. Somehow one of the interrogators probably thought that I'd used it to constantly whip the prisoners. After a few days, I was taken to Minden on the Weser River, which was the main interrogation centre in the British zone. There they treated me even more roughly, especially the first British prosecutor, who was a major. The conditions in the jail reflected the attitude of the first prosecutor. Compared to where I'd been before, imprisonment with the International Military Tribunal was like staying in a health spa. He claimed that he had been savagely beaten by the force of his own whip, and that the British mistreated him. He had definitely been beaten a number of times, and different torture tactics were used on him to extract information. Höss was later sentenced to death, and at the end he finally admitted his crimes and understood the enormity of them. It's possible that his ordeal at the hands of the British helped to get this message through. He wrote, "My conscience compels me to make the following declaration. In the solitude of my prison cell, I have come to the bitter recognition that I have sinned gravely against humanity. As Commandant of Auschwitz, I was responsible for carrying out part of the cruel plans of the Third Reich for human destruction. In so doing, I have inflicted terrible wounds on humanity. I caused unspeakable suffering for the Polish people in particular. I am to pay for this with my life. May the Lord God forgive one day what I have done. I ask the Polish people for forgiveness. In Polish prisons, I experienced for the first time what human kindness is. Despite all that has happened, I have experienced humane treatment, which I could never have expected, and which has deeply shamed me. May the facts which are now coming out about the horrible crimes against humanity make the repetition of such cruel acts impossible for all time." Rudolf Höss, when he was captured, was subjected to a beating from the people who arrested him, and he was also tortured for information. He made a number of confessions, it's believed, but some of these, it's been claimed, have been under duress. But we know he was a man who was complicit in the deaths of thousands, if not millions, at Auschwitz and at other concentration camps. He was a brutal man, and a man who would say got his comeuppance as he was tortured and beaten by the British who apprehended him. He would later be executed inside of his own camp, as he was brought back to Auschwitz and was hanged on a specially built gallows at the very camp he oversaw and saw much suffering and killing. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.